All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be focusing on 2021. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We'll be kicking off the event momentarily. We're just going to pause for a couple of beats here to let a few more folks sign on. Thanks. Thanks again. If you've just joined us, thanks for joining today's webinar. We'll be getting things kicked off in just a moment. While we wait for a few more folks to join, I wanted to fill you in on a couple ways that you can get questions to us today. One of them is by using the chat function. You'll see that there's a chat button on your screen that'll allow you to send a question via chat that all of our panelists will be able to see. But the best way for you to get involved is actually to click that raise hand button. That'll allow me to bring you into our panel. You can ask your question using audio, or you can join via video as well if you're set up to do that. Thanks again, and we'll be getting started in just a moment. All right, great. One more time, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be focusing on planning for 2021. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We're pleased to be the hosts of today's event. We of course couldn't be doing this today without the support of our sponsors. I'd like to thank AMS, AIG, and Pack Life for being the sponsors of today's meeting. We'd also like to thank our friends at Cambridge for their support of today's event as well. Thanks to you all. Today's conversation is a continuation of the Kehrer Bielan Fall Leadership Study Group series. And the topics that we're going to be focused on today and the group that we historically have brought together for today's event is really among the most engaged group that we bring together over the course of the year. And that means that we tend to get great questions from this group. Frankly, you all can send us some stumpers sometimes. So to all of you out there who've joined us virtually, I hope that you will jump in and send those same great questions that I'm sure you would raise your hand and ask if we were all in a room together today. We have brought together a handful of folks that are going to be on your screen to help move the conversation along. They are Keith Berger with AIG, Bob Carr with Central Bank, Keith Cook with AMS, Jim Fujinaga with Hancock Whitney, Regis Ramos with BBVA Compass, and David Zimmerman from Middleburg Financial, excuse me. There are also a couple of other members of the Kehrer Bielan team on your screen today, Ken Kehrer and Peter Bielan. And as I mentioned, to all of you out there who've joined us in the audience, please do jump in with your questions and comments. You have a couple of ways to do that. The best way is to click the raise your hand button on your screen. That'll allow me to bring you into our virtual panel. You can appear on video if you're set up to do that, or only by audio if you prefer. The other way is to send us a chat using the chat function. However you choose to do it, I do hope that you jump in. As I mentioned, today's event is really about focusing on planning for 2021. And to prepare for today, we at Kehrer Bielan conducted a brief flash survey. It was actually a very quick survey. It was only in the field for a few days. 16 banks and credit unions filled it out. It was a good group in that it was a nice mix of banks that own their broker-dealer and banks and credit unions that work with third-party broker-dealers. And even though there was some diversity in the group, one area where we didn't see a lot of variation in their answers is their outlook on revenue growth for next year. 201, every one of the 16 firms in the survey are planning to grow revenue next year. There are a couple of outliers in the group. You can see there's one firm that expects to grow revenue by 15% year over year. But there are there's a relatively strong or a relatively large sort of middle group of firms that are right in the sort of 7.5% to 8.5% growth range. So this gives you a sense kind of in terms of top line revenue, what these 16 firms are looking at next year. We also asked firms to tell us about their staffing expectations for 2021. In this case, we saw more variation among firms than we did in their outlook on revenue. Most firms in our survey, two-thirds more or less, do plan to grow headcount next year. Among those firms, there was a real concentration among those who expect to grow headcount by around 10 per cent, or sort of in the 10 to 11, 12% range. Again, there are some outliers. There's one firm in the group that is planning to grow headcount by 25% next year. There was a relatively large group of firms as well, roughly a third of them, that don't expect any change in headcount. So they expected the number of reps to remain level. And there was one firm in the survey that told us that they plan to reduce headcount by 5%. A third area that we looked at in this flash survey was what firms are planning in terms of their strategic focus for 2021. And we asked firms to point to a few areas where they expect for that focus to be. The most popular choice, more than 3/4 of firms choosing it, was growing referrals. Now, of course, this isn't growing referrals through the branches necessarily, right? This is growing them through social media, data mining, and other areas. As you all know, the flow of referrals from the branches has been dwindling for a long time now. And one might say that this is an issue that the industry has been slow to confront. It appears that the pandemic, during which we've been in a zero branch traffic or very low branch traffic place, certainly not helping the flow of referrals to our reps. So it seems like the crisis may have sort of moved this issue to the front burner for more firms, and they are looking at doing something about it next year. Nearly as many firms are planning to make in investments in tech next year. Again, a theme that you hear talked about a lot these days. The pandemic has forced more things to be done virtually, And in response, firms are trying to up their game. They're trying to improve what they're able to offer virtually to be, maybe be more close to what they were able to offer when their advisors were able to meet with clients face to face. About half of the firms in the survey are planning to increase their focus on financial planning next year. Fewer firms, sort of a more select group of firms, but nonetheless nearly a third in the survey, are exploring some kind of acquisition next year. So this gives you sort of a flavor of, at least among these 16 firms, what their outlook for 2021 is looking like. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Peter.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining on this topic and really helping us prep for 2021. This time of year, it always comes about that you're running at your business rate, and we're 2 months away from the change of the calendar. And because the calendar switches from December to January, that all of a sudden means the first day in January, your run rate has to increase by some number, 8%, 10%, literally just because of the turn of the calendar. And it puzzles me of how that is supposed to happen, because changing the calendar doesn't automatically mean you can do 10% more business, but you need to. So that's why we think this is so important, is the only way that you're going to be able to keep up with that turn of the calendar and those new numbers that come in front of you is by planning for it now so that you can execute it starting January 1. So we've had these meetings in the past and we've done them in person, and we've had a really great group of CFOs there that have provided great discussion and we've benefited greatly from. But it's been a limited audience because it's only been CFOs and it's only been in person. We're now able to take advantage of doing it virtually like this with a much broader reach, a much more diverse group of attendees, and hopefully it'll help a lot more firms and a lot more individuals be better prepared for next year and really go into next year with a plan and a way to execute that plan. So thanks for joining. Thanks for being part of it. As Tim mentioned, participate. And the whole plan here is that we have the folks that are on video as our virtual roundtable. We'll discuss some ideas and throw some ideas out there. But we really love to have others chime in via the chat function or asking questions. And we'll make this 90 minutes the most useful that you can have this week. So very good. So with that, the data that we're working with is certainly the industry, if you will, with over 300 firms, 26 bank-owned, 193 regional, 102 credit unions. That is literally the industry. So it's not a subset or certain firms. This data reflects what we're all about. So it's truly legitimate, and it's truly what you all have presented. What's a little different of what we're doing today than what we do on a lot of our research is you'll see here, we're looking at trends. We're looking at how these results have occurred over time to give us a perspective of what needs to happen for next year. So that's the data we're coming at you with. It's meant as a discussion starter. And so let's use it as that. So Tim, would you launch into our first one there? Okay, so virtual panel and attendees. So revenue growth. This is what the last 4 years looks like, year over year. And let me just say that this is really a summary of all firms. Bank, broker, dealer, banks that use TPMs, credit unions that use TPMs. So this is a summary of all of those. So you see 2016, tough year, 17, 18, and 19, all up single digits. 20, the jury's still out, but we hear more and more optimism of finishing strong and, maybe flat to up for many firms, slightly up to many firms. But as Tim showed, our target for 2021 is 8%. So, we in essence need to replicate our best year in the last 5 years next year in order to meet our objective here. We need to replicate our best year. So let me put it out to the panel here. What are some of the things that you plan to do that will change the business from what we've seen in some recent years to get to that great 2018 and replicate 2018 so that we can have 2019 again? Is it productivity based? Is it adding advisors, new assets? Let me just ask the panel, what are some of the initiatives that you have planned to do that?
Peter, this is Bob. I think we're doing a little bit of both of those, but I think it's a real opportunity at least in our shop, to try to improve the not just referrals, but qualified referrals. And we're doing that through monthly meetings with all of the advisors, and our structure is a little different. We have 13 CEOs, which are market presidents. Probably the market presidents might be similar to other organizations, and we're having those meetings. I meet with it's a Skype meeting or a Zoom meeting in all those markets where the advisors talk about their business development activities, which has led to the first time in really years the CEOs getting very excited about potentially not just helping us, but also we've recently changed their compensation. The CEOs all have a component to their bonus plan that tied to our revenue growth and referrals for 2021. So in some markets, we're getting a jump start on that right now. We ran a contest, which I can't even almost believe, in Kansas City, where in 3 weeks we had, and we're not a big operation in Kansas City, mind you, but we had over 250 referrals, of about 90 that led to 90 appointments already, and it's certainly, I think, it bodes well for what I think will be a pretty good opportunity to improve referral activity. We're also looking to add advisors. I think we've got 38 advisors now. I think in the budget we have 8 advisors in the budget for next year. We're having much more success over the past 5 to 7 years, growing our own or taking new to the business folks, and grooming them instead of hiring and paying the upfront bonuses that are needed to attract advisors from another firm. As we find everybody's got a non-compete, they really don't bring over a lot of business as much as they think or we think, and we've had much more success hiring younger folks and putting them in a junior position with a senior advisor, letting them learn the business, and then maybe we at the end of 2 years we're tearing off some of the kind of excess accounts, high revenue accounts that may generate less than $200 a year in GDC, and giving those to those folks as a start. They work those accounts primarily as they get to learn the business, working with the senior advisor. So, so it's kind of a twofold approach. But I think the biggest thing that we've got accomplished in the second half of this year was getting the CEOs to have a component to their own personal incentive plan tied to wealth and our referral goals, trust referral goals, and trust and brokerage revenue goals in each market.
Bob, that's excellent. Maybe Could you explain how you were able to get that accomplished where the CEOs are now, incented for wealth business? Because, I mean, that is no small accomplishment to say the least.
I wish I could be the one it was my idea, okay? But the actual implementation was done by, but by the head of the trust company. I told the head of the trust company that was what we needed to do if we were going to have a great year in 2021 and beyond and get the growth that we needed. And to my knowledge, all we did is ask, and they gave it to him. It's not a huge component. If they have, it's 15% of their bonus opportunity for 2021 is tied to the wealth management unit.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tim,
Go ahead.
it's Regis from BBVA. Again, from a finance perspective, a lot of what we're doing is very similar to what Bob just referenced. And again, incentives really drives behavior. But we, again, recruiting, same thing here. From a regional bank perspective, we're looking to grow our FCs, but through book brokers, promoting FCs to book brokers, and then replacing them with junior FCs, like Bob referenced. Obviously, referrals are a big component, so looking to grow those as well. And I think we're going to be successful because the bank is flush with deposits, so there is a less focus on growing deposits. Therefore, we get a little bit more opportunity or more at bats. But on the incentives front, like you said, we did the same thing. We've seen over the last 5 years really a diminishing shelf space in the branch manager incentives plan as relates to investments. The same thing for we call them DREs, which essentially are the CEOs. At one point, we're probably represented about 25% of the shelf space in their scorecard, and we're down to probably less than 5%. And it's a battle we fight constantly. It's a battle we fight every year, and it's a battle we lose every year. So one of the things we did, and it took 2 years, but we really got compliance to buy into it and legal to buy into it, is we're now giving our branch managers, and that was this year, and then next year our CEOs will have the same, a direct override on revenue produced in their branches. And what that means is we're basically telling them, hey, that if you achieve plan, that's one, you got to achieve goal every quarter, and two, if you're fully licensed. So we're also encouraging them to get licensed, which is going to hopefully give us a little bit of a bullpen for FCs. But if they do both, if they're fully licensed, which is about 1/3 of our branch managers, and if they are able to achieve plan, they get an override on the revenue generated, which is pretty rich. I think it represents, if they do it every quarter, they'll get paid more on this override than they do in their total scorecard bonus. And so we've seen a lot of success from the branch manager plan, a lot of re-engagement, just by simply adding in that tool where we're giving them a direct override on revenues if they achieve plan and if they're fully licensed. And we're now going to our human resources committee to get the same thing approved for the CEO or the DRE level, where for their region every quarter, if they achieve plan, they will get a percentage override on the revenues generated, which again, I think will also re-engage. And I think, again, same thing there, about 1/3 of our CEOs or DREs are fully licensed. And so again, really trying to give investments more shelf space, because we're losing on the scorecard. We have been losing, and we can't seem to gain space. So we decided to go outside the scorecard with a sort of commission override, which has been very successful so far this year.
Very nice. Yep. I think in both of those cases, it shows, it's a long-term endeavor. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon to get these things done. I mean, Bob, I'm going to guess that's not the first time that you had to ask for something that, took years and years to ask for it to finally happen. And Regis, it sounds like, it's efforts over years that have allowed you to, get to a point where you've evolved to now you're trying this commission approach. So both of those are, testament to we have to really continue over time to push these initiatives for them to finally happen.
Peter, this is Bob again. I think that one of the things that probably all banks are realizing today with the low interest rates, the low interest rate environment, and the deposit situation that they're in, they want us showing opportunities more today than they may have ever wanted to in the past. They're wanting to grow fee income. They're viewing us as they can get all the deposits they want. That's not an issue.
Right.
And certainly now that it appears maybe loan demand has started to roll over a little bit, at least in our bank, you know, almost every market is very interested, and they're not even upset with us giving us customer lists of depositors that are not our clients and things like that that we can call and use for prospecting, so we don't have to even wait for referrals. So the environment seems to have shifted in our direction, and the wind might be at our back now for a couple of years as we stay in this low interest rate environment.
Yeah, I tell you, that allows us to segue nicely into the next piece of data that we have, and exactly what you, Bob, and Regis were saying. So this is a common number that you all have seen from us many a times. It's the penetration, investment revenue per million of FDIC core deposits. And here's the 4-year trend. Other than 2019, it was moving ahead pretty nicely. And, but this calculation has two variables. The numerator is the investment revenue and the denominator is the deposits. And, we can control the numerator. We can control investment revenue, or, it's our responsibility to control the investment revenue. Tougher for us to control deposits. And really two things come from that, from the deposit side of this, is that one, we see our financial institutions growing deposits at a relatively fast clip. We saw it in 2019, based on what we're hearing right now and in other places, they're going to grow again in 2020. So that denominator is going to continue to get larger as far as what we use as FDIC core deposits, which means we have to grow revenue all that much faster just to keep up with how fast our bank or credit union's growing. So, it poses a challenge on one side in that it's hard to have that growth rate when our bank and credit union are growing fast. But as Bob just mentioned and Regis mentioned, now maybe deposits aren't as much of a focus as they are in times where loans are the champion and where loans are outpacing deposits and the bank will pay up and they need them to balance off the loan portfolio. Right now, that doesn't seem to be as much of the case. So are there any other approaches or initiatives that are being done to make sure that we retain those assets somewhere within the financial institution? Because if you remember way back when, that was one of the objectives of why banks got into this business. It was to retain those assets when they were potentially rolling off or when they weren't needed for loans, to keep that client within the bank. And we hadn't talked about that as much in recent years because we've been in the opposite environment. So are there any other initiatives that any of you see out there or contemplating that will help, really take advantage of this unique opportunity of deposits not being the level of focus as they have been, in the recent past?
Hey, Peter, it's Jim. Can you hear me?
Sure can, Jim. Hi.
So you're right. Deposits don't mean as much today as they've done in the past, even with goal setting, because with all the funds that came in through PPP and other methods this year, we do know that they're flighty, and we want to hold on to them. So we're going back to basics on a couple of marketing campaigns. We have these TVs in our financial centers, and we're doing some marketing with rate boards that we've never done in the past here, where we're showing higher rates on an annuity, for example. The whole focus is to bring awareness to the branches, to bring awareness to clients who may be walking in. We know there's a delta and a gap today that may not be here forever. And that gap is between a CD that's only giving you 30 basis points versus a fixed annuity that could be a couple hundred basis points higher. So it's a great opportunity to focus on some of those deposits. And the whole focus is to get people to be aware, sit down with an advisor, let the advisor do some profiling, hopefully get into a financial plan, and from there gather assets. We're also doing marketing campaigns directly to customers too on our overall investment opportunity through email and social media. So we're really trying to focus on a different avenue to get to our customers and attack that, as you said, that deposit opportunity while we still have it.
Yep. Very nice. I tell you, the taking advantage of planning in an environment where the bank is flush with deposits is an opportunity to really improve our planning coverage to the people that need it. And again, an environment that we haven't seen, for quite some time. So, Jim, I think you're really onto a great approach there to fully utilize that deposit opportunity and help those clients that may not have come up on the radar in the past, but we can add a significant amount of advice and value to their world now that we see what they have and we do some planning for them.
Peter, one more thing to add to, again, it's Regis. And I agree. I think some of the stuff that Jim just said is really good stuff. Not only are the banks flush with deposits, but at least in our case at BBVA, we have historically been a hot money bank, candidly. We've overpaid for deposits. So the bank has almost taken an opportunity this year. And so we've always been an outlier with our peers in cost of funds, how much we're paying for deposits. And the bank has aggressively priced down the deposits. They're letting the high price stuff run off. And so a lot of that means high price CDs. And so we're kind of taking advantage of that with a lot of campaigns internally. And Jim mentioned some fixed annuities where a lot of these CD customers, their CDs are maturing, and they're being offered significantly less rates now because the bank is not as, they're not as incentivized to retain that deposit anymore. So we're used to be a naughty word, send them over to investments, but now those are coming frequently. And of course, those customers are looking for, with the low rate environment, they're looking for something that's safe. And so fixed annuities have really driven our product mix this year, especially in the retail space. But we're also seeing that here on our end. We're doing a lot of internal campaigns because of it. We're allowed to send messaging to the branches weekly via some emails with some products on fixed annuities and other products. But the bank is aggressively pricing down their deposits. They no longer have that appetite to keep some of the high price deposits. And so we believe that's going to continue in 2021. And so I don't know if anybody else is seeing that same thing, but again, we're not only are we flush with deposits, but we're also, the bank is aggressively pricing down, which is really benefiting us this year and will most likely again benefit us in 2021.
Good, interesting angle on it. Thanks, Regis.
Yeah, Peter, it kind of occurs to me, it's an unusual year given what we're going through. When you look at PPP, that brought in a lot of deposits too, depending upon how much that particular institution may or may not have worked to support that program. In our case, we brought in a tremendous amount of deposits. So, those deposits are starting to exit. So I'm not sure if this year is going to be a good year for us to use historically the way we managed, deposits to productivity. It's definitely an anomaly, and next year may be as well. So I think there's some funny things going on in the numbers that we all need to look at. And then it's, how do you attack that as described? But in that case, to stick on the PPP case, we're working very closely to follow up. More than half of the clients that we supported were new to the institution. So it brought in many thousands, quite frankly, of new clients that we're able to go after, and we're partnering to go after and be introduced there. I think, as described, the balance, the ratio between deposits and loans for the institutions seem to be at a place where the retail side, the consumer side of the bank is being proactive to reach across the aisle, if you will, and even suggest in a proactive way that they work to introduce, more clients or help to shift some of these deposits back over onto the investment side of the business. So it's just a very unusual year for obvious reasons, probably. But the thing we're really trying to react to too is, we kind of describe it that this year we've been hit with a baseball bat, and next year we'll see the swelling. We don't really know where the pain is yet, but we do know it's coming. And so we're a little bit concerned about that from a behavior standpoint and kind of a false read this year from a sense of security of success, if you will, almost disbelieving how well we've done through this environment, that something's not telling yet, but it's going to surprise us sooner or later. So I think, we're trying to maximize all these opportunities. For us, we're still on the tail end of a merger and acquisition spree over the last couple of years. So it's some of the obvious things, the basic things, the territory optimization, all the things that we talked about before. But I'll leave my thought this way. It feels like we're still talking about things the way they've always been. And I'm not sure that's a great way to think about what the future is going to be. We believe we've trained our clients not to come in the branch. And then we think we'll have 20% drop in traffic going forward forever. Because of what has happened here. We've accelerated our digital investments. So we've taught them how to be more digital, or we shoved them through the drive-through, or, they're just kind of reinventing how they connect with the bank. So we know something structurally is going on here, and we're trying to think through what that means as we prepare for the future.
Yeah, very interesting, David. I think that leads to our next topic. So Tim, if you would advance us a slide. So David, you're referencing the branches and coverage and all, and this is some history on the coverage, meaning the millions of dollars of FDIC core deposits per advisor. Again, an industry-wide number, and you can see it's been in a range. It's been somewhat static here the last few years, but in all cases, it's been under the optimization, under the optimum levels. Because when we look at individual firms, we find firms that are really the highest producing are in that 125 to 175 million-ish range. And the total industry number, is obviously much, much higher than that. So, the only way to change this, especially in a larger financial institution, a larger deposit financial institution, is to be able to add more advisors. And as Tim mentioned earlier, the average is in this 10% range as far as net new advisors for 2021. So, that's a pretty big number relative to how much we've added in the past years. But it needs to be a big number because this core deposit number is going to continue to go up. And without coverage, we don't get as many clients. We don't service the clients as well. We run the risk that they have their financial services needs met elsewhere, that they take the loans and deposits elsewhere, or they don't act on the things that they're trying to do, be it planning for retirement, or whatever their goals are. They're just not able to act on it, or they act erroneously. None of those options, taking their, be it taking their business elsewhere, not acting on them, or acting erroneously, are things that we want to subject literally our best clients to. So we've got to get in front of them. We've got to get in front of them with advisors or other ways. But either way, we've got to get in front of them. So what do we see that we're going to be able to do to get this 10% net increase in our advisor base coming off of this year and going into 2021? Who has some thoughts on that?
Well, I'll start, Peter. So a couple thoughts there. We've had this issue with recruiting. We didn't really grow our business in terms of advisors the past couple of years. So we made it a huge priority this year to focus on getting fully staffed. And I brought on a contingent recruiter for the first time in our organization. And that's been helpful. That's really been helpful to driving more people. I've also done more coordination with their internal recruiter to really focus on target type of advisors and firms and other ways to get some more people to meet with and talk to. We also did a campaign internally with our bank in terms of a referral fee, where it used to be you get $100 if you refer an advisor, and bumped it up to $1,000. Okay, so, and now we're going to maybe do $2,000. So there's different ways of getting more activity and awareness out there that we need to hire more people. So that's helped. The other area that's really helped for us is that, as we all know, we may not find that ideal advisor. Sometimes we find a junior broker. So we expanded our AFA program so that we could hire more people. And we've been able to put the AFAs into the FA roles this year to fill some gaps that we really had open for quite a while. So we're focused on building out the associate financial advisor program. And then lastly, we've talked to a lot of people this year, and the whole focus, one of the focuses between now and the end of the year, and that means only a month. You really only have a month left to recruit and hire people with all the holidays. So we're telling people, get fully staffed now. You got to get there. And the other part is that the incentives for regional sales managers, I included recruiting in there this year for the first time. So really more focus on staffing, because that's a key part of what we're going to be next year. And we all know you got to hire them now, because they take a long time to ramp up to be fully productive. If you don't hire them now, you're not going to get people productive till the second half or the last part of 2021. Yep,
you're right on, Jim. I mean, what we do now also determines 2022 and 2023. If we're not adding now, we don't have those advisors to go from 200,000 in production to 350,000 in production down the road. So good for you with those initiatives. Let me ask this question a different way. Are any firms considering, at least just in a conceptual stage, some type of acquisition of either an RIA or an advisor group, or just a different approach to bring in advisors other than I guess in addition to the the standard recruiting of one in at a time? Has anyone considered approaches of bringing in a team or a group or an organization and make a big advancement with a single deal?
Peter, this is David. We have 3 RIAs, again, over the last couple of years that have been acquired. You can imagine we're in the middle of bringing them together to create scale, all the things that you would work to do, whether it's the back office. The front end can be challenging from the egos that are tied to the principals that started the firm. That's where the real magic happens. But we continue to look for the right opportunity. I think the market, they're pricey right now. For every opportunity, there's over 60 buyers. That alone tells you that it's probably priced a little bit too high today. But for the right situation in the right market, you can come across smaller RIAs that are more thoughtful. It's not just about price. It's about culture. It's about how their clients are transitioned. It's about how the people in their firm are taken care of. And quite honestly, that's how the last couple of RIAs have happened for us. That proposition can be tricky. I'm still not convinced that it's as easy as it might look when you look at the big venture capital firms and some of the others that have rolled up a lot. It's very complicated, especially again in a bank environment. There's some convincing that has to happen, to open up the book and cross-sell and some of the things that they may not have done, when they were standalone type situations. So it is an opportunity, but I think it can be very complicated to plug that in a bank environment.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think the key is to use that as one of the things that you evaluate, and it may in some cases reinforce whatever approach that you have in place. If your approach in place is to invest in licensed bankers, move them along, graduate them to advisors, and ultimately have a farm team that way, it gives you something to evaluate that against, to see what the cost, what the timeline, what the resource commitment is compared to going out and bringing in, producing advisors. Whatever that approach is, I think it's helpful to have something to compare it to. And then you determine what's the right one for the right organization at the right time. But it's good that you're at least considering it. There is more and more of it being considered out there. There's more and more of it, and As the firms become scarcer and scarcer, the price is high now. Where does it go if there's fewer of them down the road? It might still go up. So don't know, but it's worth evaluating.
I agree with you, Peter. As much as I would love to bring on an RIA, I look back at the couple that we looked at and then we lost that mainly because of the valuations out there. It's ridiculous. And as you know, many banks like to, basically get back your earnings in 1 year or 2 years at the most. And some of these deals take a lot longer to accredit. So it's hard to do that. We're in the middle of one right now, but I can tell you we're not going to get it. So to me, I've been focused now back to what we said earlier, just old-fashioned recruiting and getting people staffed. We have so much deposits and branch or financial centers and upstairs and work with their wealth teams that we could do to build more bodies and get more people up and running productively and hire in those areas, as well as career pathing from licensed bankers to associates to advisors, then bringing on an RIA. So again, I'd love to bring one on board, but economically it's very difficult to do and culturally.
Yep.
Jim, we've had a question come in over chat. I think folks have been listening to you talk about the need to hire now, right, so that you have time to to ramp these folks up. They'd like to hear more about what you're doing to help them to ramp up once you've hired them, and if anyone else on the panel wants to jump in on this, please feel free.
So we revamped our training program and we really formalized it. So we have a 1-week full-blown training program, which is done virtually today. It used to be in person. And so we make sure that the laptops are here on time before they join. We make sure that we get them up and running. We have webinars in place for learning and training prior to having the actual virtual training in place. We assign our trainer to do ongoing training after the week to make sure that the new hires who may run across a lot of issues once they get back into the financial centers for the first time can congregate and meet and talk about the challenges and best practice on how to get over it. We also want to make sure regional sales managers there on day one. They need to make sure that the advisors are integrated with the bankers, with their licensed banker partners and so on. And then we provide ongoing training. We brought a head of financial planning who is a subject matter expert in managed money and life insurance. And that person actually goes out and does a lot of work on the sales process. So we really built out our training program. So it's not just, pre and here's a training and go out. It's ongoing follow-up training to make sure that they're up and running and gets successful quicker than it did in the past. Because the ramp-up time is very costly when you don't have a good training program.
Yep.
I tend to agree with Jim. This is Bob. We typically, if we hire a new advisor who is not established, let's say, because we like to hire advisors that are that kind of test out like they have the qualifications and the characteristics to be a good advisor. We've had good success with those, but we usually put them in a 6-month program where they do all aspects of our business. They'll actually be a sales assistant for a while. They'll work on our bond desk. And certainly they're going to be doing work with a senior advisor. Then when we put them out in the field, it's usually with a senior advisor. And they're going to be calling on the bottom 25% of that advisor's book and trying to build advisory. They're going to be on a salary plus an AUM bonus on what they can convert into advisory. And then, usually we've handled it 2 ways after they kind of get through that training program. And usually that's all told about 18 months. Either we will purchase the bottom 25% of that book from the senior advisor to give that newer advisor a head start, or in most cases, what's happened is they become a junior partner. of the person that they've been working with, that they have a good relationship with them. And some, they'll get an 80-20, 75-25% arrangement, split revenue arrangement. And that way they're going to continue to learn from the senior as they have been for the prior year. So.
Okay, good. All right, Tim, let's advance to the next one. And Ken, if you'd maybe you take the next couple here and lead the discussion.
Okay, Peter. One bright spot in the business over the last several years is the continuing growth in advisor productivity, average annual GDC, and long-term growth over the last decade or so, not straight line, kind of sawtooth like we see here, where productivity was down 4% in 2017, up 15% in 18, down 4% in 19, and so on. But a continuing march upwards of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 3 steps forward, 1 step back, I would say. But I think it's important, Tim, why don't you go to the next slide too? It's important to understand that the numbers we're showing you are firm averages. In other words, we looked at the average coverage rate among firms, and that was the average advisor productivity in each firm averaged across all firms. So it answers the question, what is the average productivity in a firm? But a different answer to that question is, what's the average productivity of an advisor working in a bank? And that's quite different, because advisors who work in the big bank-owned BDs have much higher productivity than advisors who work in regional community banks and in credit unions. And not only do they produce more, there's much more of them. So if you were to ask the question, what's the average productivity of the average advisor in the bank? In other words, taking all the production that's gone on in banks and dividing it by all the advisors in banks, you get a number that's much higher, 486,000, as opposed to the 376 that we have as the average of firms. But we see this distinction between the productivity of advisors in bank-owned BDs and others. This is persistent. We've noticed this same kind of gap, maybe even growing over time for the last 2 decades. So, but why is it that these advisors are so much more productive? Some of you are with bank-owned BDs, some of you are with third-party BDs. Why is this huge difference in productivity? I guess, David, you've had the experience in both, right?
Yeah, Ken, I can speak a little from experience. I mean, I was at Wells Fargo for 13 years, so I've seen the mega bank, the amount of support, the resources, some of the things that we all think about, whether it's practice management or sales support or line management, choice of products, technology. I mean, I think it's a number of things. Now, I'm going to guess that bank may be challenged to keep their productivity as high going forward. So not to necessarily pick on them, but I think some of it's resource-based to be able to be there first on some of these things that help advisors to be productive at scale, more opportunities to talk to more clients more frequently. You have more shots on goal, if you will, at that level. I think that's part of it. So, I mean, I guess my thought is we'd be hard pressed to narrow it down to what the perfect answer might be. And it's an opportunity I think we all still have. The genius is in the execution, right? I mean, we've been trying to get advisors to do financial planning since the 70s, and it's now still a novel idea, which always surprises me. The same with practice management. I mean, that was in the 80s, quite frankly. So, I mean, some of it is getting people to, change their behavior, be consistent, run their business like businesses, and just, I think it's all of those things. I don't know. From my standpoint, I think we'd be hard pressed to find one specific answer that just stands out as the golden egg here.
Of course, it's important if we could find that secret sauce, look at the increase in productivity that the regional and community banks and credit unions could achieve just by jumping up there to another 50% in production, right? What you're saying seems to maybe boil down to better sales management.
Well, again, I think that's coaching. Coaching and practice management. Whether it's all the things, clean the bottom of the book. Go after higher clients, focus your target market, specialize. All the many things that we've all lived and talked about. The FAs that we all have, maybe even in smaller institutions that are the most productive, that would beat these numbers, are the FAs that have done those things. So
in terms of opportunity, they seem that these three kinds of advisors in three different settings, seem to have the same kind of branch size territories. So that doesn't seem to be a difference. Any other thoughts from people about this difference?
Let me ask. Go ahead, Regis.
No, I was just saying, just one more thing too. And again, I don't know if this pertains to bank-owned BDs. Probably not. Definitely doesn't pertain to Wells Fargo, like David referenced. But I've worked for a couple bank broker dealers, and what I can say today, again, I'm on behalf of BBVA, because we actually have very good production at the FC level, is the consistency of management. So I can say I think we have 13 regional managers, 2 regional sales directors, and they've all, I think of those 15, 13 have been there for more than a decade, if not longer. So I think that consistency in the program, you create that consistent behavior, the internal networking really has helped drive coaching and standardization of coaching across DFCs. And the other bank broker dealers I've worked at, which again were regional size, the production level was candidly a little bit below what we have here at BBVA. And I think looking back, there was not that consistency. Every year, 2 or 3, we had some turnover of about 25%, of, if not more, of our regional managers. So I think that's another key component here. It's hard to pinpoint it because it's across the different type of banks or different type of broker dealers. But at least I could hear the consistency of management has really led to good internal networking within the bank, allowing for good referral flow, trust within the broker dealer. So the retail division trusts us because we've got consistent management. So I think that goes a long way. And I don't know, again, I'm not sure it's a bank only thing, but I think it's a very important dynamic for all type of firms.
And of course, for a firm with less than 20 advisors, which many of these regional community banks and credit unions are in that category, it's really hard to support financially an advisor. You have a sales manager for 7 reps. It's, that's a big overhead burden on the operation, and they may not be able to get as strong a sales manager as I could if you were at a large regional bank. Any other thoughts?
Let me ask the group, do we think the tenure of the advisor has any impact on this? Because we know that tenure has a big impact on overall production. Do we feel that, that's one of the contributing variables that could cause this?
I do, Peter. Tenure, obviously, if you look at tenure versus, those above 3+ years, 5+ years, you'll notice a marked difference in productivity in that organization. So tenure has a lot to do with it. And I don't think it's really about, a TPM versus a non-TPM type program. I think it's really about the bank commitment to the organization. And I think you see that a lot more in perhaps a larger institution where the branding is throughout the organization, the marketing effort, the board meetings that you have and everything else. That could play a part of it too, in addition to everything that David and Regis discussed. I think there's that inherent area. But I also think this is going to change as the world changes over the next year and we see more movement among institutions in who they're, whether they're bank owned or not. I think you'll see much more changes in this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Peter, we don't have benchmarking data on tenure. We tend to get that when we do sort of advisor level studies. But one clue that you're right about tenure is the different in average asset levels in advisors across these three settings. So the typical advisor in a bank-owned BD says grace over 100 million in assets, 111 actually. Whereas the average assets per advisor in regional and community banks is only 69 million and 59 million in credit unions. That's a huge difference in assets. And clearly assets grow with tenure. So I think you're onto something with tenure. But
and look, I think you're right, but I think, look, the big banks were first with golden handcuffs, which encouraged people to stay longer before, maybe some of the smaller institutions were able to adopt and put those things in. So when you look at all the variables, whether it was first with technology, first with golden handcuffs, first, I mean, they had the scale to try and do some of those things. And I think the rest of us have spent time trying to catch up. First to cross-sell, first to pay for cross-sell. I mean, all the unique things that made it interesting to stay in that environment, to build that asset base to the size that it got to. And then, the rest of us are catching up here.
And we've got a chat coming in from someone on this question, Richard Feder from Fort Lee Savings in New Jersey. He says, well, gee, if assets make a difference, why don't we just give assets to these advisors and the production will go way up? Peter, you want to take on the next section?
Let's do it. Tim, advance it one. Yep. All right. So this shows the assets on average for an advisor in their book. And as Ken just mentioned, this is not by channel. This is total for all advisors. So it encompasses the bank BD as well as the firms that use TPMs. So you can see the last few years in the 60s, 2019, that number increased with some market appreciation and some other things. But the biggest driver of this, and what is extremely important to the success of a firm, we believe, is the average amount that an advisor brings in new assets in a given year. More specifically, those net new assets that an advisor brings in a given year. If they can bring in significant millions of dollars each year and not lose them, it's going to be pretty evident that they will be successful just because of the revenue that it throws off, the relationships that they'll have, and the opportunities that'll be in front of them. So, we've seen, averages in the $6-8 million a year, but, we know that a very good advisor should be bringing in about $10 million or, targeting $10 million in new assets in a given year. That's not to say there aren't some that are at 15 or some that are even at 20. But how do we all think we can channel our business so that we can have advisors bringing in that kinds of new dollars, and at the same time retaining the assets so they're not just churning them and running them through, and then their book ends up, from 61 million to 61 million and a half, which, may help year one, but doesn't really grow the franchise and grow the opportunity. Who has some thoughts to share on that? I mean, one idea I'll put out there, maybe that we could start to talk about is sales support. We see firms with very different levels of sales, sales assistance, sales support, and that in many instances can be the difference of advisors being able to retain assets in many cases. And in addition to that, an associate advisor, if you count them as something like sales support, may be able to take on clients that are smaller and allow that lead advisor to spend more time prospecting or prospect bigger dollar clients, again, leading to more assets plus the retention of assets. And then maybe just the third to throw out there as an idea is firms that have deployed some type of centralized trade desk or call center or some way to better meet the needs of many of these dormant clients that, stay in a book that, aren't really being taken care of by the advisor. So you run the risk of losing them, but there's still a service burden. So they're taking away from, again, the new business efforts to bring in that $10+ million a year. Do any of those ideas resonate with any of the panelists?
Hey, Peter, let me start with not so much those ideas, because I do believe in client segmentation, but more on the retention of your client assets first. And when I look at that, I really look at the client experience and making sure that you make your clients feel like you're they're the most important thing, right? That they're your only client. That's what clients want to feel. So how do you do that, right? And that comes to your approach, your sales process, the offering that you have. It comes to financial planning. But in addition to financial planning, I think what's key and what we're really striving to focus on is the data aggregation. So we want to make sure that we have comprehensive financial planning. So we're really focused on getting our clients to gather all their assets. We use Yodlee, we use MoneyGuide Pro, and we integrate the two, and we want to make sure that we provide that type of planning. We have $500 million right now so far that we've gathered this year outside, not internal yet, because we have to do the next phase, but assets that we've tied in through data aggregation. So there's plenty of opportunity by having your clients bring that in. I mean, I think that's going to be a game changer in the future that we're just starting to get to where RIAs have been doing, but we haven't yet. So we're really focused on taking planning to the next level through data aggregation and getting your clients to consolidate their investments with you and do full planning, not just on what they have with you, but what they have everywhere.
Yep. Nice. Maybe we expand on that. Technology is one of the answers to this. I mean, I don't know how, we can really get to 10, 15, $20 million a year without utilizing technology either in, proposal generation or client-facing tools to help with the sales process, or ways to leverage service, technology, ways to level service, or to analyze the book, or to analyze what a client has, or to aggregate, or, if we try and do it manually, we're going to be back in the 5 and 6 million range of 10 years ago. So we've got to find ways to utilize technology. And I think many firms are. In the survey, I believe Tim's number, he said 71% of firms are looking to make some sort of technology investment in 2021. So I think that's encouraging, because to me, one of the secrets to get to this 10+ million is going to be by using technology to help advisors be bigger than they are. And that's what I think it does. So any additional thoughts on technology or any of the other ways to target that 10 million a year? Because I would encourage you all to put that number out there for every one of your advisors.
Yeah, I think one way, I'm not sure we can slice the data, but I think of this almost like client segmentation. A 1 to 3 year advisor is going to do very differently than a 3 to 5 and a 5 to 10. Some of that relates to skill set, confidence, target marketing, all the things that you would do as your business develops. So to kind of have one generic answer, I think is kind of hard. It needs to be a little bit more pinpointed, maybe to the phase of where they are in their career. But the technology idea, I think it's interesting. Zoom is like Zoom, here we are. I've talked to people about the productivity gained from this, and primarily from a servicing standpoint, but with your existing book, that connectivity is how you get more referrals. I'm still struggling with the new business. How do we do some of the things we used to do face to face? But here's the point with why I think we need to always, going forward, use this technology more. And I challenge all the advisors, I say, is this helping you an hour a day? You know, whether it's your commute time, whether it's, you know, the hallway interruptions, whether it's the drive, you know, figure it out. Can you find an hour? Most people are going to tell you they can find an hour. At the end of a year, an hour of productivity is 6 weeks of production time. That's 5 a week, 4 weeks, 20 times 12 is 240 hours divided by 4. So in this environment, as every one of your advisors has 6 weeks of production time now that they didn't have before, that's a lot of productivity lift. Can you let that go when we go back to new normal? I don't think you can. I think they're going to have to find a way to do both now, be as productive as they were, but now be more productive, Peter, to your point, with productivity, because there's so many gains here. Commute time between branches, commute time to see clients, all the different ways. Find that hour a day as you rebuild your new practice going forward. And there's a lot of productivity in there.
Yeah, I love the analysis, the mathematical analysis that you give them, because we all know it, but we don't put pen to paper and say, what does it really mean and what time pickup do you have? I love looking at it like that. Maybe just one more, thought on this, if I could put out to the group to talk about is, how about the advisors self-sourcing business? We've relied on referrals to get us to this point in this industry, and that's still an advantage for us. But at the same time, who knows what next year is going to bring as far as, numbers of referrals or environment or the future, or if the branch system changes. And, but the advisors are still going to need to bring in business some way, somehow. So what about plans that are in place to, hire advisors that are better at self-sourcing, resources that you're giving them to help self-source? I guess, first of all, do you believe that that's got to be a component and a skill set of advisors today in order to be successful, that maybe it wasn't as important some years ago, but going forward, 5 years from now, is that the primary source of business for advisors is self-generated, and branches just, add on? I don't know, but I think, this is the time to explore those types of thoughts.
Peter, I'm pounding the table on this because I believe you're onto something here. I mentioned earlier, we think branch traffic is going to be down 20%. Forget the fact that all the big technology firms are trying to get into our business, as are others, for the clients. But the way I try to challenge the advisor is, we've all built what we call the infrastructure around omni-channel. I tell the advisor that they are the omni-channel. They better meet their client on text. They better meet them on Zoom. They better meet them face to face. They better meet them however, wherever and whenever the client wants to meet them. And so they have to have the skill set in all of those approaches to deal with the clients. And I think it's the same way from a prospecting standpoint. So much like, previously we would tell people the CPA firm, the accounting firm, those are ways that you look at opportunities to go build your book. I think you're just going to have to say the branch is no different than a CPA firm. It's no different than an accounting, a mark, all the different ways that we told them to go external. They can't over rely on the traffic or the success from the branch. If they have a year or they have a month where they get extraordinary lift because they got a lot of referrals, but if they build their practice solely that way, I think they're at risk.
Good. Thank you, David. Okay. Well,
Peter, we did have one more comment on technology investments from the audience. Barry Schmidt from Cambridge Investment Research suggests that higher investments in infrastructure may actually change the culture of the institution and give the institution a more vested interest in going forward. I don't know, Barry, did you want to amplify that?
Yeah, let's see. We've Barry has the he can go ahead and unmute himself if he wants to join. In the meantime, we actually had another question come in over chat. This is anyone paying more for self-sourced revenue versus branch sourced?
This is Regis from BBVA. We are, in a way, again, we're not necessarily, it's self-sourced, but we're calling it new money. But new money that you work from the book. So if you're able to generate new money from your book, not from a branch referral, but completely new to the broker dealer, we are paying a 5%. We're giving you a 5% lift on your grid on that production. And so it is our most expensive source of revenue. The referral channel, we actually have the expense that we pay our licensed bankers. And so you have the referral piece, normal book of business, which is just a normal grid. And then, yeah, again, new money, self-generated without the help of a referral is our most expensive revenue source that we have here. And it works quite well. I think right now, 25% of our revenue this year, which is a big number, is coming from self-sourced new business. And I think a big component of that is this 5%. And we've had it for years, but I think FCs are really using it this year more than ever, given the pandemic, and really trying to work their book.
All right, Barry, can we jump back to you? Are you unmuted?
We may have lost him.
Okay. Okay, well, if we get him through, we'll revisit that question. Okay, so Tim, here we're looking at assets, the screen now that Tim just put up, we're looking at return on those assets. So, you can see the changes that we've had here over the last few years, and that return, which is investment revenue divided by book of business, this high 50s to mid 60s range over the last few years. But what I think we want to prepare for is the risk of commission compression, of be it either commission-based products paying lower or managed money paying lower, but also really not being able to stick with assets that are in the book that are unproductive, stock positions that are held in a book, are not necessarily worked with an advisor, but are in that base and not adding to that revenue, but are adding to the asset total. How do we address that and make that more valuable to the firm? That's one of the big drivers of this. Is if these books were in all active assets, meaning you used dollars to purchase commission-based products or managed money, my guess is the ROA would be much higher than it is today. But not all that is. There's many significant dormant clients and accounts. So what ideas do we have out there to help stabilize and increase this return, getting it closer to a wirehouse number, which is about 100 basis points? You can change this a little bit, and when you spread it out among all the assets in the firm, it tends to be a pretty big number. So there's a lot of leverage to it. Who wants to share some thoughts on how to better optimize the potential leverage that we can get on this?
Peter, I'll take a crack at it. We maybe approaching it slightly different. I mean, we're looking at what we call it the enterprise platform. So instead of just the wealth or the investment platform, where for that same book of business, instead of being bound by the channel, we're trying to pay advisors for a part of a loan, a part of a mortgage, a part of trust, a part of estate, a part of more solutions that they can show to that book of business, where in essence, their asset based is being used more than once. In the investment channel, it's used across the enterprise channel. So we're coming at it mainly from that approach right now, versus how can we force that fee back up in an environment where it really feels like it's just going to continue to compress.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, you're not going to be able to just simply increase your fee schedule in today's marketplace. It's going to continue to compress. So what we're looking at is what are the assets that are so-called dead assets that we have in this organization. Some of those that have been around in our company, but we haven't really done a good job of marketing to. Some of them are in our lower client segments. So we're going to focus on, in the next year, building out and expanding our call center along with a whole hybrid robo offering to provide some sort of solution to some of these customers that really we haven't spoken to in a long time, and we really don't know what they really have. We assume that they're not worth the time to spend with an FA, but who knows what's out there. So we're going to focus on that through a call center approach, a hybrid robo. And then on the mass affluent side, where you do have opportunity to expand upon those assets, as David talked about, loans and deposits and other areas that we could work with, we're going to expand and build out a premier banking type business for those mass affluent clients with their licensed bankers, registering them, working side by side with a senior FA, a premier type of approach to really focus on the mass affluent, because there's a ton of mass affluent customers in all the banks out there, much more than there are with a high net worth or ultra high net worth customers. And we could do a better job of penetrating that client segment. So we're looking forward to doing that in 2021.
Good. Very nice, Jim. Thanks for sharing that.
Peter, one thing that strikes me about this chart, not only is it substantially lower than the warehouse experience, but looks pretty slim compared to what assets earn in the bank, right? And it brings home the fact that how much more valuable a dollar is for deposits and loans than it is in an investment services setting.
Yeah, that's right. 300 basis points.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For the bank in some cases. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So just to build on some of the other thoughts, Jim, I think you're right on with those. Reducing number of households that an advisor handles might help with this, to take some of the dormant accounts away and to work them a little bit better. So, I think that's part of what you're saying there, Jim, as far as the call center and the robo, maybe, institutionalize the clients that way. And then right-sizing territories as well. I think that has a big impact, on these results. But even if you think they're going to stay low, if you think that, maybe 56 is more the norm than 66, or 46 might be the norm, if that's the case, it just makes the point that our advisors and our firm are going to have to bring in a lot more new assets in order to generate the same revenue going forward that we've become accustomed to in the past. So even if we've got to either try to raise this ROA, or we're going to have to bring in significantly more assets, or do both, optimally. But I think it's important for us to build that into what we're working towards. Otherwise, we run the risk of finding ourselves with, a lower ROA and not the plan to be able to increase the assets enough to compensate for that, which again diminishes our presence, relative to the size of the financial institution. So, we don't want to do anything wrong with the assets that are in there to make them make the number artificially high, of course, but we have to really look at it, I believe, in order to adequately plan for what our business might look like in the not too distant future.
Peter, over time, wouldn't, as the share of assets that are in advisory grows and accumulates, wouldn't this number be expected to grow? Holding fee levels constant?
Well, that's why the warehouse number, I think, is higher,
Mhm.
is because, they have a larger share of assets earning 110 basis points.
Mhm.
But,
And Tim might switch to the next slide, which is,
yeah. So this shows advisory revenue and the changes over the last few years. Now, it looks like it has seemingly leveled out, and 2020, we don't have a prediction on that yet, but it seemed to has leveled out, which is interestingly, it's very similar to where the commission number is, quite similar to that. So, I think that provides a very nice balance of revenue that is, you have a lever. On commission business, you have a lever. You can sell more in a month or a year and change your outcome. The recurring revenue is nice because it continually comes in, but at the same time, you look a lot like personal trust or wealth management, where your results are very much tied to market appreciation or depreciation, and you can't really control that lever as much in a given month, a given quarter, and a given year. But having a mix and a balance between those two seems to be where a lot of firms want to go, is, about where they're at now, where they have, kind of 35, 40, up to 50% recurring, 35, 40, up to 50% commission-based, the other trailers and all making up the balance. That seems to be where a lot of firms want to grow. But, many times it's looked at as we're doing more advisory than commission, or, we're doing commission instead of advisory. And what I think we've tried to talk about here today is, how do we grow that entire opportunity? Because there's absolutely a place for both commission and advisory with many clients, within many firms, and within, many advisors' books. And I think we've talked about, a lot of those ideas today, and it's really, how do we grow this opportunity? How do we make it more core to the financial institution and what the financial institution offers? Because then we get the client's needs met in the right product, whatever that pricing scheme may be, instead of trying to manufacture, here's what our revenue flow looks like to the bank. So any other thoughts from the group on what we can do in 2021 that grows the pie, that grows the business to this 8+% number that we've got to do to, really replicate our best year in the recent past and hit our 2021 numbers? We covered them?
Pray for the market to go up 8%. I'll take that.
Well, if it goes up 8% and you have half your book in advisory, you're still only up 4%. So you're still only up 4 of the 8. So now what are you going to do?
Now, we have 85% of our business in fee business, so it would be around 6.
All right. You get the point.
Yeah, Peter, this is Keith. I mean, I would say, part of the answer to that question can be safe money reviews. You've got client cash, other safe money assets out there earning, 1 basis point or 10 basis points on a good day. Jim was touching on some of this a little bit earlier, but, at the end of the day, if an advisor is not looking at what their client's cash or safe money assets are earning, they're not acting in the client's best interest. And by doing that and scouring a client's book and looking for opportunities, whether it's something as simple as a fixed annuity or an index annuity that, depending on what you're looking at, you're going to generate 2 to call it 4%. It's a heck of a lot better than 10 basis points. And oh, by the way, get some nice, transactional revenue in there as part of the mix.
Right. Great point, Keith. And, we don't have this in the deck, but believe it or not, we don't have all of our clients' investment dollars. I know that'll be shocking to some of you and some advisors, but we don't have 100% of their wallet share. So to Keith's point, there's money out there that we can do more to get. Tim, do we have one last question and then we'll wrap up? I see.
Yeah, we have one last question that's coming over the chat. Has anyone centralized portfolio management to decrease the management cost and increase advisor efficiency?
We haven't, what we've done with our fee schedule for both investment management and trust and the brokerage RIA model is to levelize the FA advisor fee. So the other fees we've made transparent, what the firm fee is, what the the fee is for clearing, custody, InvestNet, et cetera. And the advisor fee we make consistent at the dollar amounts for every level. In other words, if it's under 250, it's this, 250 to 500, $1 million plus, whether it's investment management and trust or whether it's in brokerage. We wanted to make it consistent and what product it is, whether it's Rep PM or UMA or SMA. Therefore, an advisor is not incented more to sell a certain product over another product. So that's the only thing that we've done. We haven't lowered the fees because of the consolidation of all the work, but we are doing a fee review right now, so we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good question. Okay, well, with that, I think we'll call it a wrap, and thanks to our sponsors, AMS, AIG, Pac Life, and Cambridge. Want to thank all four of you for being part of this and helping bring this discussion to the industry and to the attendees. We appreciate that greatly. And panel, great job having this discussion in an open environment. Your ideas, I'll tell you, will help a lot of different firms and folks. So thank you, panel, for doing that. And Tim and Ken as well, and our sponsors again. So the next things on the Kehrer Bielan list, December 3rd is our next study group like this. Please look to join that. It's integrating digital advice. A little bit of what we talked about here today. It'll follow up on that. And then November 12th is investment and wealth management, the bringing together of retail investments and personal trust or RIA or wealth management. And then December 15th, the last one of the year, the call center, service center, some type of centralized delivery unit that we've had a lot of interest in the last couple of years. So that's what's on the agenda for us in the next 6 weeks or so. Please look to join or direct the right people from your organization to participate in these. And as always, we'll take your ideas and incorporate them into these discussions because they're for you. We want them to be as beneficial as we can. So if you have thoughts or ideas of what you want covered in these, we're absolutely always open to hearing what you say on that. So Ken or Tim, any final words?
Oh, I think we've got our work cut out to get ready for 2021. So go get them.
All right. Well, thank you all. Much appreciated. Be safe. And we look to catch up with you all in the near future.
Thanks.
So long.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.